Civilized society.
Welcome to an illegal episode of Peasant Radio. In this episode, we're going to be discussing my new obsession. It's an unregulated, banned, dangerous, FDA-unapproved obsession. And I'm going to tell the listeners and viewers why something that I once thought was totally mundane, made sense, and was actually bad for you is now the opposite to me. Why now I see this topic of our episode as good, healthy, and subversive. So welcome to Peasant Radio. Welcome to the portal through which you are about to become a raw milk extremist. If we had a theme song, you would drop it right there, but we don't.
Well, it's 2023, so it's the year of maybe we'll make a theme song.
Maybe we'll make a theme song. I mean, we do have our monk chant as the opener. That's a theme song. Anyway, so I started chugging on the raw milk, guys. I started imbibing the real milk, as the extremists call it. So why? Why am I not dead? And what's going on here? Why is Barry Weiss talking about raw milk? What the hell is going on here? So, this episode is going to be a little bit about why I even started looking into raw milk, why I think it's actually good and not dangerous and definitely shouldn't be illegal. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about what the process of changing your views on something so much is. Because I went from being someone who didn't drink any milk, was basically vegan when it came to milk, thought it was bad for you, and thought no one should drink it at all, to now someone that asks my family members to go to farm stores in the middle of nowhere to bring me gallons of raw milk. It's fun to have a somewhat unstable personality because sometimes it leads to growth. We're going to call my raw milk enthusiasm growth for now. So, Justin, do you have a word of the podcast?
No, this is a Peasant Radio episode, is it not?
I know, but I was hoping you might surprise us with something fun. But you have no fun for us. So now what?
I suppose we discuss raw milk, a subject which I don't know a great deal about.
But I do. Nobody believes me. I scared my dad, first of all. He will not try the raw milk. He does not like it. Thinks he's going to get sick. But do a lot of people get sick from raw milk? No, they don't. No, they don't. Do you remember all the recalls? What were they for? Salad, bagged lettuce, shit like this that was full of E. coli and whatever. So look, you can do the research on your own. I'm not going to regurgitate all the raw milk things, but essentially...
Don't regurgitate all the raw milk. That is bad. That's not good for the reputation of raw milk. I'm going to say something from the beginning here before you go on about facts and science and all that, which I care not for in the year 2023. I'm going to do something extreme, and I'm going to call raw milk. I'm going to call it milk. How about that?
That's going to be so confusing, even though I endorse your spirit.
I won't use the language of the milk industrial complex. Do you understand? And I say it jokingly, but it's kind of true.
It is.
So I reject that. I reject the. I haven't drank any raw milk, and I don't like milk. I do eat a lot of milk products.
You don't understand.
Well,
this is where I'm gonna share some of my newly gained information. So listen, here's the deal. Everybody thinks essentially that milk is bad for you, or at least there's different classes of people, right? There's the old school that is like milk builds strong bones. Wrong, lie. This is what I thought once upon a time was like, oh, the milk industry is telling us all these things, but actually milk is really bad for you. It's bad for people with allergies. It causes like mucus buildup because it stokes a kind of allergic reaction. It doesn't actually help your bones, all these things. This is actually about pasteurized milk. See, this is the really interesting thing about me changing my views on milk, was that once upon a time I thought, this is a bad food. Human beings shouldn't be drinking this. Look at all these bad things that happen. I didn't think that the things that were bad could have been coming from the pasteurization of milk. And this is a really cool little microcosm example of how easy it is to build an entire worldview that is incorrect based on one little thing that you overlooked. So I was like basically a vegan in terms of milk, because I thought all these things were caused by milk when a lot of them are caused by pasteurization. And look, this is the thing. People have been drinking raw milk forever. We were not pasteurizing milk until like 200 years. It's only been like 200 years. Louis Pasteur. We all know this guy. So obviously he's not from that long ago. That just happened. So what happened to all these other human beings that have been drinking milk from the herds of goats and cows that they, domesticate and keep? They were just dying all the time? Clearly not. Everybody now is dying. Look at everybody around you. Everybody's obese. Everybody's sick. Everybody has asthma and diabetes. All these problems. Everybody is so sick.
I'm not. I'm not sick. But so I have a question.
You're different kind of sick.
Yeah, strong sick. So I have I'll pretend to be a milk executive, a pasteurized milk executive for a moment, but also another minor point about history. When the process of pasteurization was discovered, it wasn't like then, whenever that was, and it would have been early 1800s or late 1700s or something. It wasn't like then they started irradiating milk or whatever for everybody. Like, so that process itself probably didn't actually occur on an industrial scale. My guess would be until the 1950s or something.
Yes,
and I would guess that in most of the world, even a lot of parts of the world, obviously, like in the plains of Mongolia, they're not going to the store and pasteurizing mare's milk, which is a fermented mare's milk is actually a powder. Listen, I'm letting you talk to the people, ease them in to the extremism. If you want to get truly extreme, you drink fermented mare's milk, but that's beyond the scope of this episode. So obviously, people just drink milk. Now, I'm going to take on, let me shroud myself in the persona of the milk industrial complex for a moment, okay? The reason that you can't feed everyone raw milk now, though, however, extremist, is that because of the supply chain and the way that the modern food network works, that you need products to sit on a shelf for a relatively long time in a grocery store. That would not be conducive to health and safety for the people. That is, okay.
Damn the supply chain, first of all. No, I like the supply chain. Let it go. Leave it be. It runs naturally. It's magic. This is an incorrect thing that I found out. Everybody thinks, oh, raw milk, it's going to rot right away and you'll die. It doesn't rot. Pasteurized milk actually is what spoils. Raw milk turns into buttermilk, and then you can also make cheese from it. It doesn't rot. I did this. I kept raw milk and I drank most of it, but then part of it started going what's called sour. Sour just means it's turning into buttermilk. And so when it turned sour, I made a cake that required buttermilk. And I didn't even die. No one died. I've been drinking raw milk for months now. Drinking this. I even tried it. Okay, this is not CDC approved. If the FDA is listening, don't. I tested out the buttermilk, the sour raw milk, because I was like, let's see if it's true that it really doesn't spoil, that it just turns to buttermilk. So I drank it. It's just buttermilk. It was just kind of sour. Like, it just tasted like buttermilk. So, and I also didn't get sick. So either I have a masterful immune system and like incredibly powerful digestive system, which I don't, like, not really.
I
Or, well, we're going to test it with the buttermilk. We'll do the buttermilk test. Or it's actually fine. Look, I think here's the whole thing.
Hold on briefly. Let me just, so you don't, I have lived in rural Transylvania on a couple of occasions.
Of course.
I have drank milk products which are not approved in any way. I have drank the smuntuna. No one knows about the smuntuna. Don't worry about it. Listen, I'll tell you what. I did actually get food poisoned by a milk product in Romania. You know where it was?
Where?
It was in the most expensive, fanciest, most westernized restaurant in that small town that I was in, because they took stuff, probably pasteurized milk and or butter, and they left it on the shelves a long time. This is a little tip for travelers, world travelers. Don't go eat at the place that's necessarily most expensive if you're in a place where the bulk of the population don't go there. It's not always the safest thing to go to the most touristy type restaurant in a place like that, because the food doesn't turn over as quickly in the inventory, and sometimes unscrupulous restaurateurs will just feed that to the tourists anyway, or whatever. Anyway, so
no good. We don't do that.
I know about
Stay on the raw milk.
I know about the raw sour cream.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Well, look at that. See, you're not a knave.
Smuntuna.
I don't know about that. I'm not sure. I'm not that far down the dairy radicalization pipeline, but we'll get there. And look, here's the thing, briefly. Note, this is probably, if you want to think more about raw milk and drinking and whatever, here's what best encapsulates why it's actually healthy versus normal milk, which I still avoid drinking pasteurized milk, because what pasteurization does to the milk is to heat it up to such a high temperature that it destroys an enzyme called lactase. And lactase is something that your body uses to digest and process all of the different elements in unpasteurized milk. And so without that, this is why people have like lactose intolerance and have all these negative responses to milk, is because it's lacking the lactase. And so unpasteurized milk has that. So you gain all of the benefits that should be there, but that I once mistakenly thought were not there at all. It's just they're not in pasteurized milk, or at least they're not available in pasteurized milk. So that's a
question
tidbit.
Again. Why has Dr. Fauci, why has he worked hand in hand with the milk industrial complex? I'm joking. So my question is simply this. Why then did anyone start doing pasteurization of milk? Like, someone did. Did they do it as a vast conspiracy to make people not get the benefits of milk or whatever? Or was it just a simple mistake made? What's the point? Why is this?
Yes, this is something that people can look into more. So pasteurization got popular when cities started to grow, because in rural areas, there is not the risk of contamination and infection through milk products and through selling things in mass that there ended up being in the cities. So when people started migrating to cities and brought their livestock with them and put them in these like terrible conditions, and people were sick, and that they were like milking the cows, and it was the beginning of industrialization. There was a lot of a mess, and so if food is going to be unsafe, then yes, obviously you would want to pasteurize milk if someone that has tuberculosis is milking the cow. And a lot of the cows were sick, they were in bad conditions. So the reality is this was bad milk. And so people got freaked out because a lot of people were getting sick and dying because of these bad conditions that the milk was being produced in. And so, though it's not the milk itself, it's the conditions, the pasteurization worked to ameliorate the problems that those bad conditions created. But if you don't get your milk from conditions where there's rampant tuberculosis in the workers and the cows are dying and the milk is dirty, you don't need to pasteurize it. And also, you should just not drink milk, pasteurized or not, that is coming from terrible conditions like that. And usually when you're buying raw milk, since it's not, mass produced at the same level, you don't have to worry about that.
So again, questioning this though. So I mean, I don't think the problem was ever that people were getting tuberculosis through milk, right?
No, they had.
So
Well, I don't know
I
actually.
don't think that's how it worked at all. That's not the science. Even I don't believe in science anymore, but even I know that's not the science.
I don't know what they were getting from it. Not cholera. What's the thing? Listeria. I think that's the one they were getting from it.
But so this is where the milk industrial complex, there's something doesn't add up here to me, which is listeria is a if you're correct that it was listeria, that's a bacterial infection, right?
Yes, I believe.
You get cruise ships, basically they have listeria outbreaks a lot because it's basically just a prison for prison upon the sea. But there's something wrong here. There's something in your extremism doesn't add up, because if you could get listeria and pasteurization stopped that, then you would still potentially, that would have to do with the conditions of, but what were they doing? Were they just putting throwing feces in vats of milk? I don't understand.
It was a bad scene, apparently. It was just very bad. The cows were in their own filth and the cows were dying because they were feeding them something weird at the time, because this was the beginning of CAFOs, having industrialized farming. It was the start of that. So obviously they're gonna be really bad because that's not a great scene as it is, and now we know about the dangers of that. They didn't know what those situations in farming could create. They found out and people were dying, and so that's when pasteurization was actually a great solution. But the better solution is to not produce food in terrible unsanitary conditions, because remember, a lot of the major recalls of food for pathogens, it's salad and stuff. And so the problem is, of course, any food item is prone to being dangerous if it's produced in a way that infects it with something dangerous.
I always like to say I'm more dangerous than my own food. That's one of the things that I live by. In the year 2023, during this podcast, I want to give the people some simple aphorisms to live by. Be more dangerous than your food. Now,
this is good.
The reason salad is a problem is because it's shit water gets sprayed on it from the fertilizer, like the fertilizer sprinklers or whatever,
good.
Which causes the bacteria, which then call, So what do we do? Pasteurize our spinach? I don't know. But now taking on the persona again of the milk industrial complex executive. But Salome, we do live in large urban environments, and unfortunately, pasteurization is still a necessity given the fact that we must produce milk at an industrial scale. What do you say about that?
Well, you should not have any food that's produced on a scale that requires it to be dangerous.
Raise the cities.
Raise the cities? Annihilate the cities?
R-A-Z-E. Sorry.
Well, look, I believe raise the cities. Let the people leave it first, and then you can raise it. But look, the thing is, this is the problem actually, is that all this stuff is super mass produced as opposed to going to your local farm and getting milk. There is no problem with raw milk on the more, local scale, because it's just not possible. You'd have to be really messing up to
I'll give you
make it dangerous.
But this is the milk executive talking. I'm going to play a lot more characters in the year 2023 on our podcast. But not everyone has the time to go to their local organic extremist farmer and purchase raw milk. Don't you understand? Convenience plays a part, or whatever.
Well, then don't. I don't really care. My point is that I don't want it to be illegal. I think that that's crazy and way overstepping that if you have a cow, you cannot sell the milk from the cow. Like there's a bunch of regulations around it. Like the raw milk that I buy, it says
All they
it's
do
for
is label
pet
it
food.
for animals.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
exactly.
what
Which
they-
is like we're lying. Like this is a
Yes.
system that says, hey, if you lie, we'll give you what you want. This is really bad. Just let people actually partake in the transactions that they want instead of having a pretense of lying to the government to get what they want first. But here's the point about raw milk as a cultural phenomenon now. And this is why I forget who it is. Barry Weiss, I think, has a sister, Susie Weiss. I don't know. She wrote about raw milk as, and I didn't find this out until recently after I already started drinking it and was like, oh, great. So the whole deal here is that raw milk has become this kind of like counterculture thing. And I think that's really interesting because it speaks to the mistrust in our institutions. And it's really kind of hearkening to this pattern that has happened before of like return to nature, return to tradition. But what's so funny is that in this case, it's coming more from like the right sphere as opposed to like in the 60s where it was like the left sphere, where this idea of where we should grow our own food and we should have communes and whatever. Now it's I should be trad and have raw milk. And I think that's a really interesting way to gauge where a culture is right now and where the counter culture is. And I think that most people, if you're paying attention, have seen that like right leaning stuff is kind of going to be where the counter culture is, because these are the things that you are immediately attacked for. If you have, their right wing is used as like a signal that you're a bad person, you're one of them. So eventually it's just going to become like the taboo, just in the same way my generation and young and like one generation above that, it was counterculture to be a communist. That was the taboo thing. Now that's like the norm. So raw milk is a barometer for the counterculture, and the growing interest in raw milk is a sign of the growing mistrust in our institutions, particularly institutions that involve themselves with the health of the public. Okay? And this is really interesting since it follows the pandemic, where if you're paying attention, you have completely lost all faith in the ability of our institutions to tell you anything truthful about what is good for you and what isn't. So if the FDA bans raw milk, you better start stockpiling it because it's probably what's actually good for you. And it turns out that this actually is true. The FDA also, as a side fact, didn't officially ban raw milk until like the 70s. So it's kind of one of those things. It's like, if it's really that bad, like, did it just suddenly get terrible in 1970? I mean, people were drinking and buying raw milk in the 60s just fine. I mean, I think there still was pasteurization, but it was voluntary.
Yeah, I reject it all. And I've been into I've recently been to a rural area of Florida, and I was talking to somebody, and they said there is a kind of there's a kind of weird amalgamation now where there's a kind of similar coming together between the old hippies and some of the more like right-wing people that are fleeing to the forest or whatever.
It's so funny.
Is a thing. So
do you have any more questions? Would you like to interrogate me more?
No, I mean, I
do you endorse raw milk? Make a public endorsement on the podcast.
I endorse eliminating 80 to 90% of the federal government. So I think that, that then the FDA wouldn't have the money or the means to enforce things that aren't even laws, that are rules and regulations they've written somewhere
they have
about
no
who
business
can sell milk.
In milk.
So
they have no business in milk. Listen, I'm telling you now.
It's the milk industrial complex again. I'm very yeah, I of course I don't care if what you drink. I mean, like, to me, this is not my mindset. It wouldn't occur to me to be like, let's enforce not selling goat milk. It just would not even. It's just not in my nature to even think of that as something that needs to be done by the
But this
government
is
or anyone.
why I think it's such an interesting thing, and like the growth of interest in raw milk really signals where our culture is at in terms of its relationships to our institutions, is this idea that that would be a thing. Like the day that the FDA made raw milk prohibited to sell was the decline. Like that is probably one of the most emblematic instances of something that's rather innocuous, incredibly personal, because it's what you consume and what you sell as a farmer that is, growing something. And that this external system would involve itself and give itself the authority to decide that you cannot sell a food in its natural condition. This is the beginning of the end. And I think it really speaks to where our institutions are now, how lost they've become and how bloated they've become in terms of positioning themselves to take power over matters like that. So look, this is the thing. It's very funny. My interest in raw milk was this is so just textbook as to why you don't go around just madly banning things. I didn't care about raw milk. I just didn't drink milk. And then I think I only came to like have it on my radar because I heard about some farmer or something getting in trouble for selling raw milk. And so that just, I kind of like bookmarked that in my brain as like, that's something of interest, because that seems inherently wrong. There should be no like forceful state intervention for a farmer selling people things that they willingly consent to purchase and not doing like massive harm from it. I mean, it would be one thing if the guy was poisoning the milk or something, but everybody's happy. This is a consenting transaction. Leave them alone. And so I bookmarked that. Then I went to France, and in Paris, I had this cheese wheel called le raclette, where it's like this heated device that melts the cheese slowly and you scrape it off and you just use it as like charcuterie. And the French girl that was doing this tour was saying that you can't get this cheese in the United States. And I was like, what? What? What is it that France has that we don't? And apparently it's unpasteurized cheese. They have unpasteurized cheese and we don't. The land of the free. The land of the free. In the land of the free, the French have unpasteurized cheese.
Has that. Right.
I didn't know this. So this
you're
blew
learning.
my mind.
It's great. It's great. You're now, the one warning I will give before I sign off, because I'll just say I endorse it, whatever, I don't care. There is I would say that there is potentially, not with raw milk, but there is a danger of food fads. Food fads is definitely a thing. And so like because I'm not on the Twitter, I'm not on the internet, I don't really deal with that kind of stuff. There was some figure called the Liver King, which I had never heard of. He was like this guy who essentially was doing steroids, but like pretending to eat organs or something. I don't know exactly what happened. I didn't know about it at all. Apparently it had been around for years. I didn't know about it. I do think that it's reasonable to say that sometimes trends in food come and go based not necessarily on nutrition, but based on popularity, or even, like you said, attachment to a kind of political idea or whatever. And at the end of the day, you do have to.
Okay, all right, CDC, like sit down.
I'm
do
not
your own
CDC
research,
here.
of course.
I was against the federal government before you were born. You don't understand. I was like, this was like, I was just like, no, of course there's no, I don't want the FDA to even exist, basically. I want, states can have their own version of it, whatever. That's a tad extreme. But
No, that's
You
fine.
know, I'm
here.
just saying, look, you can also get pulled around, and some idiot who's taking steroids can put pictures of himself, obviously on steroids, eating like a cow liver or whatever, and fool a bunch of people into thinking that liver is like the greatest idea. Though I know you're
but it
pro-liver also,
is.
but we don't have time. We don't have time to go into the pro-liver argument at this point.
All I'm saying is that, look, if I commit a crime, if I
Don't do
pull
it.
if I pull a Unabomber at the FDA, that doesn't mean that raw milk is bad. It means that I was unstable and raw milk was the last straw. Now, you have to look at the food for yourself. You can't just be like, I was told or whatever. Hello, like, this is not, you cannot survive with that kind of outlook, okay? If the Liver King looks like he's thriving from liver, great, but actually look into liver and decide for yourself, does this look like it would be the thing that I want? I mean, I looked into the liver, and I was like, damn, this is really healthy. It's disgusting, but it's really healthy. And the raw milk thing, I looked into it, and look, you might be wrong. Who knows? Whatever. You got to save yourself. You got to make your own decisions, because if you don't decide to make your own decisions, the FDA wakes up from its slumber and decides to start making even more decisions for you. So don't allow it.
I agree with pretty much everything you said.
I don't like the low energy. I don't like the tepid.
No, it's high energy. I'm saying my plea is, please just stop funding these organizations that write regulations about every aspect of your life. Just stop giving them money.
How?
I'm not saying you are. I'm saying that this is a plea to the...
Yes, if you're giving money to the FDA, you need to stop.
Well,
I don't know how you're doing
Everyone obviously
that,
is doing that by paying taxes.
Well,
But I mean, I'm saying the government
taxes.
funds the... No, well, this is a comedy podcast. I have nothing to say.
Raw milk says
I have
it all.
nothing left to say. All of my outlaw raw milk energy is not publicly available on the internet anyway.
Anyway, raw milk is fun.
Smuntuna is the word of the podcast, by the way.
Can you please explain it briefly while we close up here? What is that?
It just is a word for sour cream.
I thought it was something really gross. Well, glad it's not.
I've seen some warm smuntuna in a glass in the sun. It's high energy, we'll put it that way.
Oh, God. All right. Well, what note do we leave the people on? Look, I think it's interesting to think about how something you might take for granted as being a resolved issue, like, oh, I already know what this thing is about. Then you look into it and you realize, I didn't know what this thing was about. That is exactly what happened to me with milk. Like, I went a 180 on it. And so who knows how many other things there are like that. It's good to kind of treat life like a mystery that you're actually actively trying to figure out. And so you're open to hints that there might be another way of viewing this that's more accurate. Because if I wasn't that way, I'd still be solely drinking almond milk, which this has its problems. All these things have their problems, but you should at least try to gain as much information about things as possible, as opposed to being like, I've made up my decision, I've cemented my identity, I am done. Like, how boring. Because now I get to be a raw milk extremist. Who would have foreseen this for me? Very fun. We got a new episode for the people. They get to learn a little bit about raw milk. It's good.
You need to learn a bit about concluding an episode more succinctly.
I don't want to conclude it. I want to keep indoctrinating the viewers and listeners on raw milk. Anyway, make your own decisions. Be healthy and dare to do your own research. People hate this. They hate to hear that. But do it anyway. All right? Peace out. You have any last parting words?
I don't.
Good. No. Bye.